He was a single dad, a powerful CEO with everything money could buy, except love. For one special night, he ordered a girlfriend to accompany him to a party. But when his little daughter met her, she asked the question that would change their lives forever. Can she stay forever? What happened next will warm your heart. Before we begin, make sure to like this video and subscribe to The Kind World for more life-changing stories. Daniel was a man who seemed to have it all. He was a successful CEO, admired for his sharp mind, commanding presence, and ability to close million-dollar deals with ease. Every day he wore his power suits like armor, walking into boardrooms where people respected him and at times even feared him. To the outside world, Daniel embodied everything one could dream of: wealth, power, influence. But behind the polished exterior, when the meetings ended and the office lights dimmed, he returned to something very different. An empty, quiet house that echoed with loneliness. The only light in his life, the only true joy that reminded him he was more than just a man with money, was his little girl, Lily. At just 7 years old, she carried both innocence and a maturity beyond her years. She had lost her mother when she was very young, and though Daniel tried to fill both roles, father and mother, he knew he wasn't succeeding the way she deserved. He could buy her toys, dresses, and everything money could provide, but he couldn't replace the tenderness of a mother's touch or the warmth of a family that felt whole. Lily was cheerful and brave, but sometimes, in the quiet moments, Daniel would catch her looking at old pictures of her mother. It broke him in ways no business failure ever could. Daniel's heart ached because he wanted more for her. He wanted her to laugh, to feel secure, to grow up in a home filled with love and comfort instead of just financial privilege. He often told himself he was doing his best, but in the silence of those long nights, he knew that his best wasn't enough. He couldn't shield her from the emptiness. Then came the invitation that forced Daniel to confront his personal void. A prestigious gala was approaching, an event where the most influential figures of the business world would gather. For Daniel, attending alone would not only highlight his personal isolation, but also invite whispers and judgments from his rivals and peers. In the corporate world, appearances mattered, and walking in without a partner would only add to the narrative that Daniel was successful in business but failing in life. He sat in his office late one evening, staring at the gold-trimmed invitation. His mind weighed heavy with worry, not just about the event, but about the reminder it carried, that he didn't have anyone by his side. He thought of Lily and her ever-growing need for a nurturing presence, someone to balance the strictness of his routines with gentleness, someone who could make her laugh freely, the way children should. Daniel realized he couldn't keep showing up to these events alone, not just for his image, but because it was becoming harder to pretend he didn't long for companionship. It was then that he made a decision that felt strange to a man like him. He arranged for someone to accompany him to the gala, not out of romance or love, but as a way to fill the role temporarily. He reached out through a discreet agency that provided professional companions for such occasions. It wasn't something he ever thought he would do, but he convinced himself it was necessary, if only to keep up appearances. Still, as he thought about it, Daniel's heart wrestled with guilt. What kind of father was he? Hiring someone to play a part, even for one night, seemed like a shallow fix for a deeper wound. Yet he justified it by reminding himself it wasn't about him. It was about presenting a united front for his business, and perhaps even for Lily, who deserved to see her father not as a lonely figure, but as someone who at least looked whole. The truth was, Daniel wasn't seeking glamour or charm. What he wanted, even if he wouldn't admit it, was warmth, someone to sit at his table, to speak kindly to his daughter, to remind both of them what it felt like to belong. As the date of the gala approached, he couldn't help but feel nervous. He wasn't used to opening his home or his heart, even temporarily. He had built walls of steel around himself since his wife's passing, and now, even the thought of letting someone pretend to be close unsettled him. Yet beneath that unease was a flicker of hope. Perhaps this night would offer more than just a facade. Perhaps it would remind him of the man he used to be, the man who once believed in love and laughter and family. And though he would never say it out loud, Daniel silently prayed that whoever walked through his door would not just be a stranger for a night, but someone who could show Lily, and maybe even him, that the emptiness didn't have to last forever. Would you like me to continue this into the moment when Emma actually enters their lives, so the 700 words evolve into the emotional meeting too? So, Daniel did something he never thought he would. He reached out to an agency and hired Emma, a woman whose job was to be a professional companion, someone who could stand gracefully by his side at the gala and keep up appearances. To him, it was just a practical solution, a temporary arrangement, to silence gossip and avoid the uncomfortable looks of being alone. He didn't expect anything more than polite smiles and rehearsed conversation. To Emma, it was another assignment, another evening where she would dress up, walk into a world of wealth, and pretend to belong. She expected polished marble floors, cold luxury, and endless business talk. That was the life of clients like Daniel, impressive on the outside but empty on the inside. But when Emma stepped into Daniel's home, she was met with something different. She was led not into the grandeur of the dining hall, but into the warmth of a child's world. Lily, Daniel's 7-year-old daughter, ran toward the door the moment she saw her. Her eyes widened as though she were seeing something magical. Dressed in a simple pink dress, clutching a stuffed bunny in her hands, Lily froze in the doorway, her mouth falling open in awe. "Daddy," she whispered, tugging at his sleeve but staring at Emma the whole time. "Is she the princess you promised me?" Daniel's breath caught. He hadn't promised her a princess, not exactly. But in his daughter's eyes, every story, every bedtime tale ended with a princess walking in to make things brighter. She wasn't asking for jewels or tiaras. She was asking for someone kind, someone who could stay. Daniel felt a pang of guilt, realizing how much Lily longed for that missing figure in her life. Emma's heart softened in an instant. She wasn't used to children being part of her assignments, and for a moment she hesitated, but then, instinctively, she bent down to meet Lily's gaze. With a gentle smile, she brushed a strand of hair from the girl's face and said softly, "Maybe I can be, for tonight." The way she said it carried more than just playfulness. Her voice was tender, filled with a warmth Daniel hadn't heard in his house for years. Lily's eyes sparkled, her face lighting up with a joy that seemed to erase the shadows of loneliness. She threw her arms around Emma's neck, hugging her as if she had known her all her life. Daniel watched silently, his chest tightening. Who had expected a businesslike interaction, polite and detached. Instead, what unfolded before him was something far more human, far more real. Emma wasn't acting, not in that moment. She was simply being kind, and that kindness was already reaching the one person Daniel cherished most. As Lily led Emma into the living room, showing her toys and drawings, Daniel stood back, caught between relief and an emotion he wasn't ready to name. For the first time in years, his home didn't feel quite so empty. And though the night had only just begun, a part of him wondered if this unusual choice, the one he thought was only for show, might end up changing far more than just how people saw him at a party. Do you want me to expand this scene into a full 700, 800-word version with more dialogue between Emma, Lily, and Daniel to make it flow like a mini-drama? At the gala, everything sparkled. The chandeliers, the polished marble floors, the shimmering gowns of the guests who mingled with glasses of champagne in their hands. For Daniel, such events had always been about image and business. He walked into them with a practiced smile, shaking hands, making deals, never letting anyone see how detached he really felt. But tonight was different. Tonight, Emma walked beside him, holding Lily's hand as though it was the most natural thing in the world. Emma slipped seamlessly into the role he had hired her for, her grace turning heads the moment they entered. She smiled warmly at the people Daniel introduced her to, speaking with a kindness that felt genuine, not rehearsed. She leaned down often to check on Lily, who usually grew restless at such events, but tonight she seemed enchanted. Instead of tugging on her father's arm asking to go home, Lily laughed and whispered secrets into Emma's ear as if they were lifelong friends. Daniel found himself watching them more than he watched the business associates who surrounded him. For the first time in years, his daughter's laughter rang through the room, bright, carefree, and unburdened. People noticed. Some raised their brows, surprised to see the notoriously serious CEO accompanied not only by a beautiful woman, but also by a smiling little girl who radiated joy. Whispers began to circulate, not in ridicule this time, but in admiration. Daniel, the untouchable man of steel, suddenly looked human. He looked happy. It struck him hard. Happiness. He hadn't realized how long it had been since he'd felt it. Comfort, too, the kind that didn't come from contracts or wealth, but from something simple, something warm. Emma had been hired to play a part, but what Daniel saw in her eyes when she knelt to adjust Lily's dress or when she leaned down to laugh with her wasn't an act. She wasn't pretending to care. She did care, and that realization shook him, more than any hostile takeover or high-stakes deal ever could. As the night went on, Emma made space for Daniel, too. She listened when he spoke, not just politely, but with a quiet sincerity. She noticed when he grew tense, placing a reassuring hand on his arm as though to steady him, and each time, Daniel felt a strange calm wash over him. The walls he had built around himself after his wife's death, the walls he believed were unbreakable, suddenly felt less heavy. But it was Lily's joy that mattered most. Daniel could never forget the way his daughter clung to Emma's hand, the sparkle in her eyes, the way she leaned against her as though she had found something she had been missing all her young life. Watching them together, Daniel realized this evening was no longer about appearances or about fitting in at some gala. It had become something far more personal. Emma wasn't just playing a role. She had walked into his life for one night, but in just a few hours, she had managed to do something he couldn't. She had given his daughter back her laughter, and for Daniel, that was worth more than all the million-dollar deals in the world. When it was time for Emma to leave, the air in Daniel's house grew heavy, almost reluctant. The laughter that had filled the evening began to fade, replaced by a quiet that neither Daniel nor Emma knew how to break. Emma rose from the couch, smoothing down her dress, offering Lily one last smile. But before she could step away, Lily rushed forward and wrapped her tiny arms around Emma's waist, burying her face into the fabric of her gown. "Don't go," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. She tilted her head up, her wide eyes glistening with tears. "Can she stay forever, Daddy?" The words hung in the air like a fragile glass ornament, too delicate to touch, yet impossible to ignore. Daniel felt his chest tighten, his heart aching in a way that left him momentarily speechless. It wasn't the first time Lily had asked for something impossible. She had wished for her mother to return, for fairy tales to come true. But this was different. This was real, right here, standing before him. Emma froze, her lips parted, but no words coming out. She had walked into this arrangement expecting to play a role, to wear a smile, to be a stand-in for a world she didn't belong to. But Lily's innocence, her raw honesty, pierced through every wall Emma had built around herself. For a fleeting moment, she saw not an assignment, not a paycheck, but a little girl who had opened her heart to her without hesitation. Daniel swallowed, hard, caught between the truth of what his daughter wanted and the reality of what this night was supposed to be. He looked at Emma, really looked at her, not as the hired companion he had arranged, but as the woman who had given his daughter back her laughter. He saw the tenderness in her eyes, the hesitation, the way she clutched Lily's small hand as though letting go would hurt her just as much. No one spoke. The silence was both heavy and full of meaning. Daniel wanted to promise his daughter everything she asked for, to give her the family she so desperately longed for, but he was afraid. Afraid of hope, afraid of disappointment, afraid of wanting more than what was meant to be. And yet, in that moment, it was clear they all felt the same truth. This night didn't have to end. Emma gently crouched down to Lily's level, brushing away one of her tears with her thumb. "Sweetheart," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion she hadn't expected. "I can't promise forever, but I'll stay a little longer." Lily's face lit up, and she hugged Emma tighter, as if those words were enough to heal every lonely night she had endured. Daniel's throat tightened, and he looked away for a moment, trying to compose himself. Because deep inside, he realized Lily had voiced what he himself hadn't dared to admit. He didn't want Emma to leave either. The contract, the arrangement, the act. They all seemed irrelevant now. What mattered was this fragile, unexpected connection forming right before his eyes. For the first time in so many years, Daniel allowed himself to imagine a life that wasn't just polished boardrooms and cold nights, but one filled with warmth, laughter, and maybe, just maybe, love. Daniel didn't answer Lily's question that night. His throat was tight, his heart conflicted, and words seemed impossible to find. All he could do was gently pat his daughter's hair and look at Emma with a gaze that carried more questions than answers. Emma stayed a little longer, long enough to tuck Lily into bed, long enough to share a quiet cup of tea at Daniel's kitchen table. Neither of them spoke much, but in the silence, something shifted, something unspoken, yet undeniable. Days slipped into weeks, and though no one planned it, Emma never really left. She began stopping by, at first with the excuse of checking on Lily, bringing her little gifts or helping with her school projects. Before long, she was there for dinners, helping Daniel with bedtime stories, even sitting with him during late nights when work had worn him down. What had started as a paid act at a gala slowly blossomed into something warm, natural, and real. Daniel, who had spent years buried in loneliness, began to rediscover parts of himself he thought were gone. He laughed again, not the polite laughter he used at business dinners, but genuine, unguarded laughter. He shared stories about his past, dreams he once had, fears he never voiced to anyone. Emma listened, not because she was hired to, but because she cared. And Daniel, who had always believed love wasn't meant for him anymore, began to wonder if he had been wrong all along. For Lily, the change was even more magical. Her world, once quiet and full of longing, now sparkled with joy. She had someone to braid her hair in the mornings, someone to bake cookies with on rainy afternoons, someone who made her feel like every day was part of a fairy tale. Emma wasn't just filling a role. She had become Lily's safe place, her princess, the one she had wished for in her heart. What began as a temporary arrangement turned into a new chapter of life. Daniel hadn't just found a companion to walk into parties with. He had found someone who fit into the spaces of his home and heart he thought would remain empty forever. He hadn't just found a partner. He had found a family. And as for Lily, her simple wish had finally come true. She had asked if the princess could stay forever. And in the most unexpected, beautiful way, she did. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to The Kind World for more inspiring stories.